right, joined once again by Brandon Duenas, who's of AZ Sports Zone, covering the Suns for Bright Side of the Sun and Locked On Suns. Thank you so much, Brandon, for hopping in. Really excited about this upcoming discussion. I wanted to have some fun here. I wanted to have some fun with you. So I kind of pitched this topic to you. I pitched this idea. I wanted to talk about the scariest players to face in the NBA because you and the Phoenix Suns just saw Victor Wembanyama and just saw the San Antonio Spurs this past week, and I thought that was such an interesting matchup. It's such an interesting back-to-back. Just really quickly, your takeaways from facing Wemby and the Wemby experience.
It was unreal. I've never seen anything like it, especially from a rookie. Just seeing someone dwarf Kevin Durant is just hysterical and terrifying at the same time. So some of the stuff he was doing is just like, it feels like he's a 2K creative player where you turned all the sliders up, made him as tall as possible, and just made him unstoppable. Like that's what he literally feels like. And the fact that this is a rookie doing this is crazy. And of course, it's the Spurs that luck into it again. Like it's crazy. that part is for another discussion. But yeah, no, that performance alone just makes me want to include him on this list already. Like that's how crazy it was.
It is funny, like. There's no way I could imagine him on Charlotte now. There's no way I could imagine him on Portland. Like, it's just not a thing. Like, he feels like the next iteration of the dominant San Antonio Spurs franchise, where you go from David Robinson to Tim Duncan and out of Victor Wembanyama. Like, it feels right, which might just make it wrong.
Exactly. No, that's the best way to put it, for sure.
It's been good, and he deserves a spot, or at least an honorable mention on this list. Only played 7 games, so I don't think we could throw him on there just yet. But I wanted to go through this with you. I wanted to, basically over the last 25 years or so, I want to talk about the scariest players in the NBA to face. And when basically how I framed this, these are the players that you never want to see come to town because they're going to give your team hell every single time. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. It's going to be an absolute challenge and just a chore to face them because they are so dominant and so good. So I have a list of guys here, but I figured I'd give you the floor. Is there somebody that came to mind first for you in this conversation?
Yeah, I think the immediate one, and this one's a little bit obvious just from a pure dominance perspective, is Shaquille O'Neal. I just think there's nothing like, I don't think there's ever really going to be anything like him again. Like just how his presence and just the way he commanded the ball, and just there's nothing you could do about it. Maybe besides send him to the free throw line, that's about it. But yeah, to me, he's the first one that pops up when I think of just pure dominance. And I don't know if you agree with that, but I just think it's tough to think of someone that was more dominant just from a presence standpoint.
He was the first guy on my list, man. That's kind of when I think of scary players, dominant players that you are worried when they come to the arena, it's got to start with Shaq, because he's a guy that they literally changed the rules for, that you had to have 3 centers on your roster in order to guard him. And teams changed their entire game plans around just so that they could deal with this absolute monstrosity in the middle of the floor. It was unbelievable to watch and unbelievable to kind of experience firsthand. But he's the first guy that came to mind for me.
Nice. Good to hear. Another one, I would say I'll just stick with the bigs here for a little bit, is Tim Duncan, especially being a Suns fan. This dude would just have a stone cold look on his face and look almost bored, and he would rip your team's soul out at the same time. So he was just, it wasn't as flashy. It was never flashy. It was just kind of like death by a million cuts. It just felt like it was never ending, and he would just chip away at you all game. And to me, I think he's just on an all-time list perspective. I think he's the most underrated player of all time. Just his resume speaks for itself. Obviously, he was on a great Spurs team, a dynasty that people aren't going to forget anytime soon. But I really think that he should be talked about in the same breath as Kobe. I think he's up there in that, closer to the top 5 than Kobe is. To me, he's just one of the closest players you can get to a GOAT resume without being in that initial top 5.
Yeah, I mean, he's tremendous. He is a He's actually not the guy that came to mind for me with this, and I think defining it as like scary players and the guys that you're scared of individually, I
Hmm.
honestly associate him so much with the Spurs and so much with just like that ethos as opposed to the individual side of things, where I
That's
think
fair. Yeah.
he didn't come to mind as much for me in that regard. But I mean that's an omission on my part, obviously. Like he was of course dominant, he was of course fantastic, and having anybody else that I have in my honorable mentions over him on this list would be a travesty. So I'm with you on that. Like the next guy on my list I had was Kobe Bryant. So like
Yeah.
I completely understand and like I can completely understand kind of the juxtaposition between those two guys where Kobe it was like fear, uh, Tim Duncan it almost felt like you're resolved to the situation, you know.
Exactly. And especially being a Suns fan, probably. I mean, both those got like we had some heated battles against both those teams back in the 7 second or less days, and Duncan especially really just sent those teams home early. And Kobe, he's definitely on my list as well. I think it's kind of a no brainer with this. Just the Mamba mentality, right? Like he's coming to your building. He wants to put on a show and go at the best player and make an impression right away. So I think from that alone, yeah, just him. And then Kevin Garnett was another guy that has kind of that same mentality. And
Mm.
KG's on my list as well. He's someone that I think is also a little bit underrated on the all time thing, and just the attitude that he would play with, like that was. It felt almost infectious to wherever he went, and like that dude was talking. He was a psycho, and those are the types of players I think kind of opposite of Tim Duncan, but they definitely have that mentality of they're coming to your city and they're not trying to leave with a loss. That's for sure.
Who would you be more scared to face in a regular season setting? Would it be Kevin Garnett or Dirk Nowitzki?
Ooh, regular season setting. I would say Dirk
Mm.
because
How
I
come?
just feel like that dude would just get hot, and once I mean there's nothing you could do about his shot whenever he gets going. In a playoff setting, I would say KG.
Yeah, he's just one of those guys that, especially in kind of the modern aspect of things, learning about how the modern NBA has really evolved. Dirk
Mm-hmm.
obviously would be tremendous in the modern NBA too,
Yep.
but there's just a different level of it with KG where he is like a Giannis, like Embiid hybrid in terms of what you're expecting from a guy like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I love KG as well. It's funny, my guy Swipa, he and I did a top 20 all time list over the offseason with MHS, and we
Mm-hmm.
got into it. Like I had Dirk on higher than him on KG on that list, and those are two all time greats, obviously, but two guys that on this list, I think I'd go with Dirk just in terms of the more scary guy, just because there's nothing you can do about the shot.
Yep. No, I'm right there with you. And I mean, there's so many bigs that I think could kind of fit that mold. Like even like Jokic for me, like he has to be up there too. I know. Are you focusing more on? You want to focus more on like outside of this era though, correct?
Oh
Or
no, I
current?
think we could go with this era too. I think it
All right.
makes it fun, makes it interesting. Would you include Jokic in this list?
Oh, absolutely. And it's kind of similar in the breath of Tim Duncan, where he may not be that physically scary guy that's like a psychopath in terms of like a Kobe Bryant or Kevin Garnett, but you just know what you're going to get every single night. And to me, that's why you have to include him because he just tears you apart on, and it's just so effortless too. That's the scary part. So it's like those stone cold killers like Duncan and Jokic that show no emotion almost at times. Like not to say he doesn't show emotion because he does, but just compared to some of these other guys, like that's what makes it more almost like intimidating. I think just from a game by game basis.
Yeah, I know that there were like I cover Jokic obviously very closely for those that don't know. Like he's awesome to watch. He is in control the entire time when he's out there. And I
Yep.
think it reminds me a lot of LeBron James in that manner where you just know that when he comes to town, you know that he's going to be in control of the game. Like it's not going to like it's going to be played at his pace. It's going to be played with the passes in mind that he wants to make, with the shots in mind that he wants to take, and there's just nothing that the opposing team can really do about it. They could force the ball to somebody else, but most of the time that's because that guy is wide open. So it's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Jokic is awesome. I mentioned LeBron. He has to be on this list as well.
Okay.
He's not the first guy that I listed though. I had listed Shaq first, and I think I'd keep it as Shaq first, just in terms of scariest guys to face. I don't know if that's fair. I don't. But it's just when you think about your actual level of fear when guys come into the league and when they're coming into your building, how you're going to deal with it. I think I've been more afraid of Shaq in that regard, but maybe that's wrong. Maybe it's because I've already resigned to LeBron, just like throughout his career, just dominating no matter what.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think a lot of us kind of almost take what LeBron does for granted in a sense. Like, because I remember even myself, like I went back and watched like an old just Miami Heat LeBron highlight tape, and I'm just like, good Lord. Like, and he's still running strong. Like, it's some of the stuff he does is just crazy. So I think it's almost like, I don't want to say take it for granted, but it's like we're so used to it that I think once he hangs it up, we'll probably appreciate it a lot more, because he's definitely especially at his peak, there is no one like him really. Like, it's just some of the stuff he does is just nuts. So definitely on my list as well. But yeah, him and Shaq are definitely two of my top 5 guys for sure, and for different reasons.
Yeah, completely different players and completely different attitudes when it comes to how to dominate a game. A guy you're very familiar with, Kevin Durant. He's going to be on this list for me. Stephen Curry going to be on this list for me.
Yep.
A little bit more modernized in terms of the actual shooting aspect of things and getting to spots on the perimeter and then hitting threes. But KD's still a mid-range assassin, as you're very well aware. What is it about his game that makes it so scary to face?
I think just having a guard skill set at his size and release point, you could try to get as physical as you want with him. Sometimes it can bother him, but ultimately he's still going to get a shot off. He's going to get where he wants to get. And it's kind of like Jokic, right? Like, you're not going to block his shot, especially he has smaller dudes than Jokic guarding him because of how quick he is and how he can make you pay if you put a bigger dude on him that's not as quick. So I think that combination of just size and handle at his size is like one of the first, like, he's just a freak. Like, we've never really seen anything like that. And now you're starting to see, like, Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren and like some of these guys, this next wave where it's almost getting normalized. But it's definitely not normal. So I think that's the best way to put it.
No, it's fair. That is a completely fair statement. Like, it makes those guys freaks too. Like, that's
Yeah.
really where we're at. No, we should definitely mention Steph on this. There's nobody, I think, in league history that you've been more scared to see when they cross half court with the basketball. Like, you just have to be accounting for that at all times. And there's a list that the NBA GM survey does where it basically is like a similar question to this one. And Steph, he's obviously at the top of that for so many years, basically ever since winning his first MVP award. And he's been going strong ever since. Like, that dude, he's the guy that, of the modern era, I mean, he's the guy that you just know you're going to probably walk out of there with an L. Like, even whether he's the guy who is shooting or whether he's the guy that's creating the open shot because you've sent 2 to him and there's a wide open guy underneath the basket. Like, it is difficult to deal with, and he is a difficult player to deal with too.
Yeah, for sure. And the gravity that comes with him, it's not just about his ability to hit, 30, 40 foot bombs. Like, you have to worry about that too, but just being the primary focus of the defense, and it still doesn't really matter. Like, it's just, and the spacing he opens up for everyone else, like, it really changed the game. Like, you look at the jump and 3-point shooting and just the value in it, and it feels like he kind of started that movement. And there's some guys that I think could have been on this list, like a Ray Allen. If he played in this era, I think he would have been perfect for it. Like, he barely missed out. If he was born 15 years later, he would have been, I think, probably in that same range, honestly, because he's more athletic than Steph is and a little bit taller. So I think someone like him playing in today's game, like, he's someone that could have made that cut for me. But yeah, Steph truly revolutionized the game. Not to get too off topic, I think he's definitely deserves to be on this list.
No, for sure. He's the greatest shooter ever. Like that's
Yep.
probably a good definition when talking about scariest players to face in the league. Uh,
Yeah, for sure.
okay, any other guys that that really stick out on your list?
So these are more like honorable mentions. I feel like, and this is just at his peak. This is a dude that I think he didn't live up to like what I think he could have been. But when he was at his peak and he got on a heater, like you knew you're in trouble. Tracy McGrady, like that dude,
Mm.
like injuries kind of derailed him a little bit, but like at his peak, I think he was one of the most gifted scorers. Allen Iverson's another guy that I think also you knew exactly what he was going to do, and it didn't really matter. He would just dissect every defense, and 6'1" maybe. It's just crazy that he was as dominant as he was. Obviously, it's not completely different dynamic than like a Shaquille O'Neal, where it's a 7-foot monster you're dealing with, but he would still just be as dominant and single handedly kind of led the Sixers to a title, or not a title, but making the championship. So those are a couple guys I just felt like I should include. And then the Pistons with like, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, Tayshaun Prince, Chauncey, and Rip. Like I couldn't just pick one of them, but like just that team just to kind of like what you said with the Spurs, where they're just kind of, you remember them as a unit.
The scariest team to face in the NBA, where if you face them, you're probably scoring 65 that night. That's
Exactly.
a tough one to go up against. Like that, can you imagine like having to score? Like I know modern offenses have definitely improved, but like those are top 5 defenders at each of their respective positions in the NBA.
Yeah.
Like there was no gap, there was no weakness. There were all like these guys were tremendous, and Ben Wallace in particular, like he's very underrated by modern standards. Like didn't make the All-Star teams that probably could have. Didn't make like he does have the Defensive Player of the Years, but for some reason it feels like Defensive Player of the Year, just in the grand scheme of things, is not as valued in modern discourse. I guess that's probably because Rudy Gobert's been winning them. Sorry, another scary Stifle Tower to face in the NBA. No, I wanted to like that. Those are good names. I'll throw out Dwayne Wade as another name that shouldn't be missed here. I had several other guys that we could probably go even more modern. We should mention Giannis too. Like
yes, that was my next one I was going to throw in there. I think he's right there as well.
Oh yeah, like I consider him and Jokic kind of having like identical careers to this point, just like different style of players, and where they go from here, I think will kind of differentiate between who would you rather have all time. But right now, it could be either of them. But I mean, Giannis, like watching him go in transition, there's really nothing like it in the NBA right now, or like has been for a while. So like he is even more of a freight train than somebody like LeBron was, which I mean says something. That's crazy. Who else? I've got Kawhi Leonard, Damian Lillard, Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic. Any of those guys tickle the fancy?
Yeah, I think pretty much all the guys you listed there were on my like the rest of my list. I'll throw in Vince Carter. I think also at his peak was a force, and just how athletic he was. Like it was more of showtime than it was like dominance. Like Dwayne Wade was another guy that you mentioned earlier that I think definitely, if we're talking about peaks, like that dude's peak was among one of the best we've ever seen at the shooting guard position. So I think he's definitely at the very least an honorable mention. Just kind of right on the brink there. But yeah, overall, I think Giannis was like pretty much the last modern NBA guy I would throw on here, and Kawhi obviously was a robot, like absolute freak, and he still is. But I mean, just at his peak in Toronto and the things he did with the Spurs, like it was not fair.
Did we mention Harden?
We did not. No, that's a good one. That's
I think I was going back through.
Depends how you look at it. Yeah,
you're right. Exactly. Like you're not necessarily fearing him in the playoffs, but I went back through the list, and God, he averaged 36 points per game in 2019. Like that is closer to 40 than 30. Like which is I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before, and we may not see it again. But no, he should probably get it. We'll give him a tiny mention in there.
Yeah.
If I had to pick 5 names for the most dominant players of like the scariest players to face of all time. I'd probably go Shaq, Kobe, LeBron, Steph. I don't think I could. Can I put Jokic on there, or am I going to be biased for putting Jokic on there?
Let's pretend. Let's pretend you'll be biased. So you gotta choose a fifth.
Okay, I'll be biased, and so I won't pick Jokic. Let's put KD up there. Let's put KD.
Hit
So
it.
we got Shaq, Kobe, LeBron, KD, and Steph. Those are the five that I think are of the last 25 years the scariest to face all time.
Yeah, that's pretty much in alignment with me. I think that fifth spot though, I was kind of that's where I had my four, and those are my top four in a different
Mm.
order, but those are my main four. Outside of that, I think you could throw Jokic, you could throw Giannis, I think Durant's right up there as well. Um, yeah, that's a tough one. I'm just gonna go out of left field and say Kevin Garnett. Why not?
Hey man, it's completely fair, and we should obviously mention Tim too. We should mention Tim Duncan.
Yes, Tim Duncan. Yep,
That's maybe he's the perfect fifth guy for this list.
yep. There we go.
It's just
He's
I
the middle
never
ground.
think of him when I think of scariness. You know, like is that wrong? Like it's just not going through my brain. So,
Yeah,
but it's definitely fun to watch, and it's good to look back on some of these guys as different eras, different styles, different players. But a lot of teams are scared where those guys are coming into the building.
yeah. And one more, Manu Ginobili, man. That dude. Speaking of the Spurs, I mean, he doesn't fit that scary bill either. But like that dude would tear you apart. Like he was the way he would slice and dice, and he kind of invented flopping or made it a little more popular. Like kind of changed the game, like we talked about with Harden uh, and Steph to a lesser extent. But I feel like Manu really kind of I don't want to say invented flopping because that's not fair because it's always been around, but really kind of made it a point of emphasis for the league. So anyone that does that, I feel like you could kind of throw in that category.
Perfected the art, if you will.
Yes.
Another guy that we should mention, I want to mention, Zach Randolph in the Grindhouse. It is not like it's not anywhere close to the level of these other guys, but
Love
like
it.
that's
I
one
love
where
it.
I think of where my mind goes, where I'm like, God, you know it's going to be hell. It's just going to suck to be in that particular building. And no, they like the grit and grind Grizzlies were always just a nuisance and a pain to face no matter what. And they won way more often than they lost. So I
Yep.
got to give them a shout.
No, that's a good call. I think them and the Pistons are like, those teams are like the last of a dying breed where they're maybe we'll see another one like down the road, but probably not with the way the game's trending.
Yeah.
So yeah, those teams I'll always remember fondly.
Well, hey, Brandon, it was great to talk to you on this episode. Make sure everybody to go follow his work at AZ Sports Zone on Twitter, and make sure to go check out Bright Side of the Sun, Locked On Suns, and everything in between. Thank you so much for hopping on for this episode. Really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course, man. Appreciate you having me on.